Few monarchs in history cast as long a shadow as King Henry VIII. Known for his imposing figure, his seismic break from the Catholic Church, and a marital history as dramatic as any Shakespearean play, Henry ruled England with a mixture of bold ambition and brute force. But behind the grand portraits, ornate feasts, and thunderous proclamations lay a more complex story, one of physical agony, personal insecurity, and a wound that never truly healed. It all began with a thunderous crash in 1536 when Henry fell from his horse during a jousting match. That single moment marked the beginning of a long, painful descent into illness and ultimately helped reshape the fate of the English monarchy. In his youth, Henry VIII had been nothing short of a Renaissance prince. Tall, athletic, and charismatic, he was a skilled jouster, an accomplished musician, and a devout patron of the arts and humanism. His court dazzled with opulence and sophistication, drawing admiration from across Europe. Yet beneath the splendor, his desire for a male heir loomed large. This obsession drove many of his political and personal choices, including the infamous split from the Catholic Church to marry Anne Boleyn. But all of that energy, all that vigor, began to fade after his catastrophic fall during a joust with Sir Henry Norris. The accident was brutal. Henry, fully armored, was thrown to the ground and his horse crashed down on top of him. Unconscious for hours, the court feared he would die. Anne Boleyn, then pregnant, was devastated. Within days, she miscarried a male child, an event some believed doomed her politically. In the cruel logic of Tudor court life, her inability to deliver a son contributed to her rapid fall from grace and execution just months later. The injuries Henry sustained that day did more than bruise his body. They changed him. The wounds in his legs festered into ulcers that would never properly heal. Without modern treatments, these lesions became infected and agonizing. Doctors attempted painful remedies, like cauterizing them with searing irons, but to no avail. Henry's once energetic gait gave way to a painful, limping shuffle. He became increasingly irritable, suspicious, and unpredictable. The robust young king now ruled from a place of chronic discomfort, and the effects rippled through his court and country. The transformation wasn't only physical. The psychological toll of chronic pain deepened Henry's paranoia. He became more ruthless, more arbitrary. Once a charming diplomat, he now ruled with a heavier, more volatile hand. In the same year as his accident, he had Anne Boleyn executed on questionable charges and moved swiftly to marry Jane Seymour. Though she gave birth to his longed-for son, Edward VI, she died soon after, leaving Henry widowed once again. His health only worsened from there. Henry's ulcers limited his movement, and his legendary appetite, unrestrained by exercise, led him to gain enormous amounts of weight. His meals were legendary: great platters of roasted meats, elaborate pastries, and oceans of ale and wine. By the end of his reign, his weight had soared past 300 pounds. He required mechanical contraptions just to move around. His custom-made armor tells the tale, with a staggering 52-inch waist. Yet he clung to power with all the strength he had left. Despite being barely mobile, he continued to make far-reaching decisions that shaped England's religious and political landscape. He dissolved the monasteries, enriched the crown, and redefined the monarchy's relationship with the church. His fierce image, still celebrated in statecraft and ceremony, masked a man who could barely walk without agony. Henry's clothing became part of the problem too. Known for his pride in his appearance, he continued to wear restrictive garments, including tight garters, to accentuate his once praised calves. This only exacerbated the ulceration. Still, his pride wouldn't allow him to abandon the royal image he had carefully cultivated. To speak of the king's ailments was dangerous. Rumors alone could lead to charges of treason. In one case, nobles were executed for nothing more than speculating that the king's wounds might prove fatal. As the ulcers grew worse, so did the smell and infection. Courtiers recorded that the stench from his leg could be detected from multiple chambers away. His moods turned darker and his retribution more sudden. He became infamous for his swift executions, including close friends and longtime advisors. Even minor criticisms could lead to the scaffold. In his later years, medical speculations surrounded his condition. While some suggested diabetes or hypertension, others theorized circulatory diseases. The once dismissed notion that his weight and ulcers were related has since gained traction among historians and physicians alike. Still, no diagnosis was ever confirmed in his lifetime. Henry died in January 1547 at the age of 55, likely from complications related to renal failure, obesity, and the festering leg ulcers that had plagued him for over a decade. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy continued to echo throughout English history for generations. He left behind a dramatically altered kingdom, one that had broken from the centuries-old authority of the Roman Catholic Church, asserted the supremacy of the English crown, and centralized royal power in a way few monarchs before him had achieved. Under Henry's rule, the Church of England was established, the monasteries were dissolved, and vast church lands were seized by the crown, enriching the monarchy and fundamentally altering the religious and political landscape of the nation. His actions laid the groundwork for centuries of religious conflict and reform, as well as the eventual rise of Protestantism as the dominant force in England. Though motivated in part by personal desire and dynastic ambition, Henry's reforms had deep and lasting national consequences. His children, Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I, each inherited a kingdom still reeling from their father's upheaval. Edward, a child king, would push Protestant reforms further, but die young. Mary, devoutly Catholic, would attempt to reverse the Reformation, earning the name Bloody Mary for her persecution of Protestants. And Elizabeth, the daughter of Anne Boleyn, would go on to become one of England's most iconic monarchs, presiding over a golden age of exploration, cultural flourishing, and relative religious stability. Each ruler, in their own way, navigated the stormy seas their father had stirred. Yet, to view Henry only through the lens of power and political transformation is to miss a deeper, more poignant part of his story. His final years were defined not by glory, but by decline. The excruciating leg ulcers were more than a medical condition. They became a symbol of his decay, a reflection of how even kings are vulnerable to the slow erosion of time and health. They likely influenced his temperament, hardened his policies, and fueled the paranoia that led to the downfall of trusted advisors, friends, and even his wives. His suffering, though cloaked in velvet and hidden behind royal walls, radiated outward, shaping court life and decisions with consequences that rippled across the realm. Once admired as a dashing, cultured prince, fluent in multiple languages, a gifted musician, a patron of scholars and artists, Henry ended his days isolated and in agony, surrounded by wary courtiers who feared his wrath more than they revered his wisdom. His decline serves as a haunting contrast to his youth and an enduring reminder of how personal pain can seep into the public sphere, especially when that pain belongs to someone with unchecked power. In the final measure, Henry VIII's legacy is far more than the tale of 6 wives and a shattered church. It is a complex, layered saga of ambition, transformation, and human vulnerability. His reign teaches us that leadership is not immune to suffering, that the physical body, in all its strengths and failures, can shape the destiny of nations. His story is not merely one of politics and power, but of a man, once vibrant and commanding, gradually consumed by the very body he once gloried in. Ultimately, Henry VIII remains a towering figure in history, not just for what he built and destroyed, but for how his personal trials became national ones. His pain wrote policy, his fear reshaped faith, And his fall, both literal and symbolic, reminds us that even the mightiest rulers carry within them the quiet, corrosive weight of being human.